At MagicCon Amsterdam, Wizards announced Mystery Booster Commander, an all-new Mystery Booster product centered around Commander Draft. Unlike any of the previous Mystery Boosters, this one also comes with new card designs. Not a huge amount, 59 as far as I've heard. By itself, this wouldn't be a problem, and only barely noteworthy. But of course, there's the question of availability. Mystery Booster 1 and 2 are notoriously hard to get, and as a result, quite expensive. Still, they are only reprint sets, so the cards in there are pretty cheap and you can get it in other ways, with two noteworthy exceptions. Foils, but that doesn't bother me. And the Alchemy-made real cards from Mystery Booster 2. These are not exactly original designs, they are taken from Magic Arena, but this is the first and only time these cards were actually printed on real cardboard. And despite not being legal to play anywhere, they are incredibly expensive. Oracle of the Alpha goes for $150, Rusko Clockmaker for $60. This has me worried. Mystery Booster Commander seems like a great product, but will we be able to actually purchase it? I tried to buy Festival in a box on the Secret Lair website, but couldn't, and a friend of mine actually was at MagicCon Amsterdam in person and couldn't even get one there. If Mystery Booster Commander has the same level of scarcity while also featuring unique desirable cards, we're going to have a price problem. I really hope that doesn't happen, but I'm skeptical. Wizards doesn't exactly have a great track record when it comes to this kind of stuff. Ultimately, it'll mostly come down to availability, and hopefully they're ramping that up for this edition of Mystery Booster. There's another factor though, and that is how good and/or desirable the cards are. Good and desirable aren't always the same. Usually good cards are desirable, but there are also plenty of exceptions where particularly niche or aesthetically pleasing cards find a large audience. I can't predict the future. I don't know how widely Wizards is going to distribute Mystery Booster Commander, probably not as much as they should. Currently, as I'm writing this, the cards are listed as only available at Magic Cons and festivals in a box, so that's not ideal. But what I can tell you is my expectations for the cards they have announced, so let's have a look. One of the big attractions of Mystery Booster Commander are the Rulebreaker Commanders. These are 8 cards with the Rulebreaker ability that allows you to break Commander's deck building restrictions in a very specific way. For example, Selûma Light of Aeson is a 5-mana white angel that says, Rulebreaker, a deck with this commander can have angel cards of any color identity and any basic land cards. For a long time, there has not been a good angel commander for 5-color angels. Angels are primarily white, but not exclusively, not by a long shot. There are angels of all colors, and up to this point, there just hasn't been a commander for that. Well, Selûma fills that role. I wonder if this is Wizards just experimenting with the idea of moving away from putting 5-color abilities on their commanders to make it so that you can play all cards of their respective creature type. To be honest, I would be glad if that was the case, because I think cards like the Ashling from the precons are an absolute design nightmare and I kind of hate them. I really would like it more if Ashling just said, hey, you can play all elementals in this deck. I think that would legitimately be cleaner design. I'm a bit torn on how I feel about these commanders. On the one hand, this is a nice restriction for a 5-color angel deck. Yes, you can play 5 colors of angel, but you can't just play a Rhystic Study. The rest of the deck still needs to be white-centered and you need to focus on white cards, which feels very angel-y. So while this is different from being a 5-color commander, ultimately it is just still a 5-color commander. I don't know. Maybe my expectations are too high, but I really wish Rulebreaker was just used in a larger or more creative way. This is true for a bunch of these. I feel like the unluckiest Planeswalker, Mola, the Next Evolution, the Everforger, and Valko in Dorian don't really make great use of the Rulebreaker text. These are all creatures that could have just been more colors, and then you would have been able to do what they currently do anyways. But there are 3 Rulebreakers that I really like. Tolabo Lock Rascal is a cute little otter that says Rulebreaker, a deck with this commander can have instant and sorcery cards of 1 additional color, not in this commander's color identity, and any basic land cards. This, I think, works much better. Instead of saying, hey, you can play any color, doesn't matter which one, you are restricted to only one color. You have to pick and choose. That means, of course, you can just play classic Izzet, but you can also go into different colors. You can play Demio or Simic, right? It's up to you. You can make this decision freely, and I think that is a way more interesting use of the Rulebreaker mechanic. Tolabo is customizable, whereas the unluckiest Planeswalker is ultimately just 5-color auras. Next we got Grislegon, Hurloon Hero, which is a 7-mana Gruul Rulebreaker that says a deck with this commander can have any land cards. Now, when I read that text for the first time, I was like, oh, that's the best one. Right, that's crazy. I can play any lands in my deck, but here's the thing. All of the good lands are already Gruul. If you're just in Gruul, you can already play the vast majority of good lands. You're actually just not that restricted. Turns out that the best land, which is of course Gaia's Cradle, is already available in green. And then the other lands that are good tend to be colorless. So, you can just already play most of them in most decks. And especially in Gruul, you're just kind of fine. So in that sense, Grislegom seems interesting, right? It's kind of cute that you can play any land cards. It is ultimately also just a variation of like, hey, this is a 5-color commander, ultimately, right? But at the end of the day, I think this is more interesting than, you can play any angel. So I don't really see a home for Grislegom as a sort of like combo commander or a commander that uses a large range of utility lands and whatnot. I do feel like it has a really interesting home as a domain commander. And in that sense, I think Grislegom's Rulebreaker exists primarily just to enable that sort of play pattern where you play cards that are available in its colors, but kind of require those additional lands and play with those additional lands. And that's neat. So in a sense, Rulebreaker for this commander, it's not so much like a downside. I wouldn't really go so far as to say that, but rather it is a way for the deck to kind of side grade itself into a path that normally a Gruul commander wouldn't be able to take. And that's neat. And I like that. So overall, I think Grislegom is a pretty interesting design, and there's definitely some space here. When I build a commander deck in real life, like with actual cards that I purchase and then I, carry around with me, I try building decks that I can continue upgrading and modifying over time. That's something that I think is really valuable and something I really enjoy. And Grislegom seems like the kind of card that would do that. So, cool card overall. I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and please support me on Patreon. Lots of bonus content on the Patreon, like for example, a complete review of all of the cards from the set. Link down below. Let's continue. My favorite of the Rulebreakers though is Wits, the Bibliophile. This is a 3-mana Azorius Rulebreaker that says a deck with this commander has no maximum deck size. This card, of course, exists for one very specific purpose, and that is building a Battle of Wits deck. Battle of Wits is a 5-mana blue enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 200 or more cards in your library, you win the game. Battle of Wits has long held a cultural foothold in Magic. People just really like this card, and I fully understand why. It's evocative. It's the kind of card where you look at it and you're like, oh, how do I make that happen? And that's what Wits the Bibliophile is for. Now you can do this in Commander. Previously, you wouldn't have been able to do this because we are limited to 100 cards. And now, of course, you could just show up with a 250 card deck and say, hey, can we roll 0 this? And I would say yes in a heartbeat. Of course I would say yes to that. That sounds funny as hell. But I do always think that there's a lot of value to making things official, right? It just makes it easier. It makes it so you don't have to have that rule 0 conversation. If you're bringing your 250 card deck that you have invested time into building, that you probably invested money into building, and even if you proxied it, that was work cutting out that many cards. Point being that if you have put that together, it kind of feels awkward to then have to sort of gamble if people will let you play it. And of course, if you're playing with cool people, they will let you play it. But I still think having to ask that question sort of places a burden on you. And in that way, I think it's great to have Wits who just says, no, this is legal. You are allowed to do this. Mystery Booster Commander features a whole bunch of commanders that were clearly made for very specific things that previously didn't really have commanders or just weren't possible. For example, we've got Nephilim Apocal, which is a 5-color commander that's only 4 mana because, it's the whole Nephilim thing, so that's cute. But when it enters, we search our library for a Nephilim, put it into our hand, and then it buffs our Nephilim. This is a commander that was clearly made just to enable the Nephilim. The Nephilim have long been a set of creatures that clearly should have been legendary. The fact that they aren't legendary is really awkward, and now they give you a commander just so you can play them. Admittedly, this commander is kind of ass, which I think is a shame. You're spending 4 mana to just tutor the Nephilim into your hand. That is really slow. That is really clunky. So I don't necessarily know if this is going to see widespread use. Admittedly, the Nephilim are really powerful, so maybe this is still worth playing. Homer the Hermit strikes me as a little bit better. This is a 3 mana black, green, and blue 0/9 big booty with landfall. Whenever land you control enters, any number of target players each mill X cards, where X is twice the number of crabs, lobsters, nautiluses, starfish, and/or trilobites you control. It itself, Homer itself, is also a crab, of course. So if we have this guy in play, we play some lands, we mill people out. That is, of course, already a thing with crabs. Crabs already like milling, and with Homer, you can really lean into it. People have long enjoyed crabs in Commander. I mean, I have seen the Bracket 1 crab deck so many times, and Homer is just kind of finally a home for it that feels like it gives the crabs a purpose, because turns out most crabs are just kind of unplayably bad. Now, unfortunately, I think the best way to use Homer is to actually just play landfall. Like, you just fucking ramp a million lands and then mill people out 2 cards at a time. You don't play any other crabs. I mean, you do play some other crabs, right? The few that are actually halfway decent, but you're not really like a crab deck. It's probably kind of the best way to actually make use of Homer. But hey, you can do the crab thing if you want to. That's cute. An idea that's been around forever has been the concept of a sorcery or instant as your commander. And Mystery Booster Commander finally explores this with Ashaya's Enduring Bond. This is a 3 mana Gruul legendary sorcery. To cast this, we need to have a legendary creature or planeswalker in play. This is just how legendary sorceries work. And then, when we cast it, we discover X, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast this spell. And of course, this can be our commander, as it says at the bottom. This is, of course, a really neat concept. We can have a sorcery as our commander. It's just a goddamn shame that it's the least interesting card that they have ever designed. I find it very unfortunate that the first sorcery we can play as a commander is just basically, hey, play a card out of your deck. It doesn't do anything by itself. Ashaya's Enduring Bond has no card text. Yes, it discovers, right? But discovering isn't really card text. It's more like, let's play a different card, Like, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm gonna get you another card, and that card is gonna do something. And I find that just kind of a shame. It would have been nice for this to actually do something. As is, it feels more of like a, like a hello to /r/custom magic. And I like /r/custom magic. I actually think it's a very fun subreddit. But at the same time, come on guys, give the card some actual text. There's also a new Eminence card in this set, and this one is again something that has been done a lot on /r/custom magic, using Eminence as a downside. So this is Sahir, Visitor in Darkness. It's a black 3/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, Sahir deals 1 damage to you. This ability triggers only Sahirs in a command zone or on the battlefield. So this is just straight up a negative, right? Like, this will just deal damage to us. If we do nothing, eventually we die to our own commander. But then, of course, Sahir has synergy with this. Whenever source you control deals exactly 1 damage to you, and whenever spell or ability you control causes you to lose exactly 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on Sahir. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, draw a card. So you really only need to do this once, because Sahir also does it once in your upkeep. So in that sense, Sahir is, like a pretty straightforward card. We just want to deal damage to ourselves, to then draw cards and, get some counters and so on. That's pretty neat. I don't think this is a particularly strong card, but I don't think it's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to just be exploring that design space of Eminence as sort of a downside, but mostly like a synergy enabler. And I think that's actually a pretty reasonable space for Eminence to exist in. Another cool thing in this set is that there's a focus on creating iconic tokens. Balefang the Unslayable creates a Baneslayer Angel, or Tomiel the Destroyer creates a Lord of the Pit token, or Arsakon, which is definitely the coolest of the bunch, creates a Black Lotus token. I really like Arsakon. This is a 5-color Planeswalker, actually proper 5 colors too. 4 loyalty, +2 Boulder Thing, -3 create a Black Lotus token, -7 Time Twister. That's just neat as hell. Creating tokens out of iconic Magic cards feels like the perfect use for them. Cards like Baneslayer Angel or, Shivan Dragon, they don't really see any use anymore. They are not even good enough for Commander. And of course, if you have a very thematic deck, you play them anyways. But they are usually better options even for the lower brackets. They're usually more interesting options even for the lower brackets. And so I think turning those cards into tokens to make it so that you still have a use for them is perfect. It reminds me a lot of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Handles their archetypes. Now, I'm no expert on Yu-Gi-Oh!, so apologies if I get something wrong, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Usually does archetypes for their decks, where it's basically everything has a similar name and then you can find your synergies based upon the names. And sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh! Will dig out an old creature, like a very iconic card, and build a bunch of synergies for it. For example, they did that with the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and then back in 2016, Blue Eyes White Dragon actually won the World Championship. So that's kind of neat. Magic decks are of course built very differently from Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, we don't have that whole archetype thing, but I still really like using Shivan Dragons and whatnot as tokens, especially as well because you can just use your Shivan Dragons as the actual tokens, right? You don't really need a Shivan Dragon token, you can just actually use a proper Shivan Dragon card as your token. And Shivan Dragon has a lot of different card iterations of it, so you can kind of like have a bit of variety there. Now, I understand I'm talking a lot about Shivan Dragon, even though it doesn't actually appear on any of these cards, but I'm just using that as an example, right? Same thing is true for Baneslayer Angel or Lord of the Pit. I love these super weird, freaky cards in the set. Like, what the fuck is even going on with Sash and Waistcoat? Like, what even is that? That's fucking great. Istvan, Tressorhorn's Lord. These are all just fantastic cards that I think are very evocative, and they're like callbacks to really old, weird magic things. Fantastic. I really love seeing this stuff. There are a couple of cards that I think are actually just kind of good, like playable. Blore the Impervious is a reference to Overprotect from Bloomburrow. This right here is a 5-mana 3/3 Frog Warrior. Very simple. Trample, Hexproof, Indestructible. Damn, that's a Voltron commander right there. I mean, that is one hell of a bogle. That's difficult to get rid of. Trample, Hexproof, Indestructible. What a combination. So that's kind of neat. Then we've got Ekfi, Contaminator Priest. This is a 4-mana white 3/3. Gives our Phyrexians we control +1/+1. And each equipment we control has living weapon. So when that equipment enters, we create a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token and then attach that equipment to it. There are a lot of equipments that have really high equip costs. And with Ekfi, we can kind of circumvent that, which I feel like makes for a really cute deck. It's also worth noting that Ekfi buffs the germs, so even if we unequip off them, they still stick around as 1/1s, which I like. That's a really nice detail there. Massimo the Magician is a Jeskai 3/2. Whenever Massimo or another creature you control enters, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card with mana value 1 from your graveyard. If a card is exiled this way, that creature gains. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, copy the exiled card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So it's a really neat enabler for cheap, effective, unblockable creatures alongside cheap, effective spells, cantrips, and so on. And then you use that to repeatedly create more and more value. It's a cool card that I think is going to be quite popular because it's a sexy cat. I mean, what do you want me to say about it? Am I going to tell you that Massimo is not a sexy cat? They know what they're doing. Let's move on. The main thing I was worried about with Mystery Booster Commander is that there would be a huge staple style card in the set. Something where you just look at it and you're like, God damn it, that just kind of gotta go in such a broad range of decks. This will be the chase card, this will be what everybody wants, and so it'll drive up the prices like crazy. Yeah, unfortunately there's something that gets kind of close. Davul, Evancar of Wrath, is a 4-mana Golgari 2/2 that says whenever another creature you control enters, you lose 1 life and add a black. In case you are not familiar, this is Carnival of Souls, which is an old enchantment on the reserve list that has the same effect. Carnival of Souls is a very strong card. Double is better. Not only is double better because, well, this can be your commander, so it's really reliable to build around, but also it's a creature. Creatures are just better than enchantments for these styles of decks because they give you the ability to find the synergies more easily, and they also like fall into other synergies they can then use themselves. In that sense, I think Double is going to be a great card as a commander, but also great in the 99 of a lot of decks. Keep in mind, this triggers even if you create tokens, so that'll be, man, this is a card that I just think is a bit too generically good for what this set should be, and I'm not a big fan of that. Let's end on a positive note. Here are my two favorite commanders from the set, and they don't even have to be commanders, to be honest, just my two favorite cards from the set. We've got Olinda the Oblivious, which is a 4-mana black 3/3 skunk rogue. Whenever Olinda enters or attacks, for each opponent put an odor counter on up to one target creature that player controls without an odor counter on it. Each of those creatures has, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 2 life for as long as it has an odor counter on it. And then my favorite part, a little bit of helper text. They continue to smell after Olinda has left the battlefield. That's great, that's so fun. Olinda, I think, is a very chill bracket 2 commander. You just kind of stink up some creatures. Look at all those poor mice and rabbit in the background of that artwork. But you just stink up some creatures and then they deal damage to their controller, pushes the game forward. Because you're in black and mono black, you have lots of space for like small reanimation shenanigans where you can just sacrifice Olinda and bring her back with like an Undying Malice. And all of a sudden you get more and more odor counters. I think you'll actually be able to do quite a good amount of damage with this creature. And of course, she also triggers when you attack, which I'm always a big fan of because I like being proactive. I think more people should be proactive. We should be smacking each other. So Olinda, cute card, adorable card. I love Bloomburrow. I love the really funny artwork here. The text is fantastic. Great use of language there. Just a really neat one. And then we've got Kuroki, Thief of Talents. This is a 5-mana black 4/4 spirit with menace. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent may draw 4 cards. If they do, look at that player's hand and you may cast a spell from their hand without paying its mana cost. If they don't, put 2+1/+1 counters on Kuroki. What a neat one. So we choose an opponent and then we ask them, hey, do you want to draw 4 cards? Which is just such a, oh man. Who's gonna say no to that? 4 cards. It's not even like a small number. It's 4 cards. God, what I would do for 4 cards. And of course, you can cast something from my hand afterwards. I'll draw 4 and then you cast something. Now, unless I've got something really filthy in my hand, maybe we can negotiate ahead of time. Like maybe I just say, okay, look, I'll take it, but don't cast this spell, right? And then you say, okay, you know what, we can do that. And we can come to agreements there. And if we don't come to an agreement, the next turn, Kuroki attacks that player, right? Like then I'm just gonna get smacked. I just think this is a really fun card because it's group huggy, but not too group huggy. It is something that pushes the game forward while also being something that just kind of engages the players with each other. And that's something I always appreciate. So this is a really, really neat card that I will be picking up. I will actually be picking it up, not as a commander though. I want to put it into my deck full of games, which is full of little dilemma situations like this. And so I'm looking forward to playing it there. Ultimately, I think Wizards nailed the power level of the cards from Mystery Booster Commander. They are, frankly, pretty weak. Clearly bracket 2 and bracket 3 focused designs, with an emphasis on opening up as much deck building space as possible. Lots of cute, evocative designs, alongside very niche effects, and a bit of exploration of various unusual but still requested ideas, while still keeping them at an arm's length to not overcommit into them. For the most part, they are so niche that I don't think there will be a huge rush for them. But there are some exceptions, of course. Massimo the Magician, Homer the Hermit, and Olinda the Oblivious strike me as clear standouts with mass appeal, and Davol, Evencar of Wrath, is just a really, really strong card that will be in high demand for Golgari decks of all kind. On the whole, my worries have been lessened, but not fully assuaged. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I would definitely appreciate that. Don't forget to support me on Patreon. There's a link down below. There's also lots of bonus content. I did a complete review of all the cards of the set on Patreon, so if you're interested in that, link down in the description. Thank you very much for your support, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.